They believed a louder voice meant a stronger truth. Admiral Eva Rostova watched the holographic tally descend. It was a simple, brutal piece of visual language projected across the system by the enemy fleet, a stark white number shrinking with every passing second. Below it, the stylized raptor sigil of the Valtori ascendancy pulsed with smug, predatory light. The number represented the remaining lives aboard the civilian convoy, trapped in the Eridani threshold, a number the Valtori were methodically and publicly counting down to zero. The ultimatum was now 12 hours from its conclusion. Her flagship, the UNS Steadfast, hung in the silent dark, a bastion of discipline against a doctrine of noise. From her command chair, Rostova could feel the low, steady thrum of the ship's readiness through the deck plates, a vibration of contained power. The main tactical display painted the scene with cold, clean lines. The huddled cluster of 34 civilian freighters and transports, the elegant crescent of the 10 human warships holding a protective cordon, and the sprawling, arrogant formation of the 73 Valtori vessels blockading the system's only jump point. The stakes were absolute. 12 hours, 3 minutes 40 seconds. The fleet-mind Solon announced its synthesized voice, a calm sea in a storm of rising tension. The Valtori broadcast continues to saturate all public channels. Their demand remains unchanged, unconditional surrender of the convoy's material assets and a tithe of 10% of its personnel for re-education. They want to make an example of them, Commander Jian Li stated, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of his console. They don't just want to win, they want to be seen winning. That was the first mistake in their calculus. Rostova's gaze remained fixed on the tactical display, her mind a step ahead of the unfolding crisis. She saw the vectors, the firing arcs, the heat signatures, but she also saw the doctrine behind them. The Valtori didn't just use force. They used the threat of force as its own weapon, amplified by a public countdown meant to shatter morale before the first shot was ever fired. They were loud, and they expected silence in return. Their doctrine is built on the fulcrum of fear. Rostova said, her voice cutting through the bridge's low hum. They believe that by showing the galaxy they can take anything they want, no one will dare to stand against them. She turned to her tactical officer. Jian, give me the latest force projection. Li's fingers danced across his console, bringing up a cascade of data. We are outmassed, Admiral, but not outclassed. Their ships are numerous but favor kinetic slugs and unguided torpedoes. Our laser and particle defenses hold a significant advantage. The choke point at the jump gate, however, is their killing ground. The glare from Li's console cast a sharp light across his focused features. Every member of the bridge crew knew their predicament intimately. A direct assault would be a meat grinder, trading ship for ship until the convoy was inevitably caught in the crossfire. It would be a victory that felt too much like a defeat, a bloody entry in a ledger they had no desire to keep. Humanity wrote its history in ledgers of mercy, not destruction. Before the weight of command could settle too heavily, Rostova's private comms chimed with a soft, persistent tone. She toggled the channel, her eyes flicking to a small inset screen, showing a live feed from the medical bay of the convoy freighter Starlight Weaver. A young girl, no older than 10, was sitting on an examination bed, clutching a worn stuffed animal. A human naval doctor was patiently explaining how the ship's inertial dampeners worked, using his hands to show how they absorbed the jolt of movement. The girl was listening, her wide, fearful eyes slowly filling with a glimmer of understanding and trust. The doctor was calming a child while a fleet prepared for war. That was the core of it, the very soul of their mission. They were not here to break the Valtori fleet. They were here to protect that little girl and the thousands like her, to ensure they reached their destination with their lives and their futures intact. The sight solidified Rostova's resolve, turning cold calculation into a warm, unyielding conviction. "Their strength is their broadcast," Rostova said, closing the private channel. Her voice now carried a new edge of certainty. "They want an audience, so we will give them one." She turned to Sub-Commander Anya Sharma at the Communications and Electronic Warfare Station. "Anya, I want you to prepare Lattice Protocol Echo 7. A ripple of surprise went through the bridge crew. Even Solon's synthesized voice held a note of caution. "Admiral Protocol Echo 7 has a 42% catastrophic failure rate in all live-fire simulations. Its energy requirements are extreme, and it has never been deployed on a fleet-wide scale. The simulations assume the enemy is rational," Rostova countered, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "The Valtori are arrogant. They believe they are the only ones with a script. A plan is only as strong as the enemy's inability to imagine it." Commander Lee leaned forward, his earlier tension replaced by intrigued focus. "Echo 7, the Ghost Lattice. You want to create a phantom fleet to draw their fire." The console before him shimmered as he pulled up the protocol's schematics, a complex web of energy projections and decoy deployments. "More than that," Rostova replied. "A ghost fleet is a distraction. I want to build them a mirror." She looked to Sharma, who was already running preliminary diagnostics, her face illuminated by the green glow of her screen. "Can you handle the power draw, Anya?" Sharma nodded, a confident smile touching her lips. "We can shunt power from the secondary weapon arrays and the starboard shield emitters. It will leave us thin on that flank, but if the lattice works, they won't be looking there anyway." The hiss of a coolant line venting somewhere in the bulkhead punctuated her statement, a reminder of the immense energies they commanded. The mystery of Rostova's choice hung in the air. Echo 7 was a notorious risk, a high-wire act without a net. It demanded perfect timing, flawless execution, and a massive expenditure of energy that could leave them vulnerable. Yet the Admiral had chosen it, without hesitation, her decision rooted in a logic they couldn't fully grasp yet. It was a move that felt less like a frontal assault and more like a carefully prepared trap. They came to make a statement. We came to teach a lesson. Rostova watched her team work their movements, a symphony of practiced efficiency. Lee was coordinating the physical drone placements, plotting their trajectories to create the most convincing illusion. Sharma was deep inside the EW architecture, tuning the frequencies that would give their ghosts substance, making them scream on Valtori sensors. Every action was precise, every calculation double-checked. They were not preparing for a battle. They were setting a stage. "Solon," Rostova said, her voice low and even. "Begin running predictive models. I want to know exactly how the Valtori commander will react when he sees a second human fleet appear on his flank." "Processing," the AI responded. "Initial models suggest a 93% probability of target fixation. Valtori doctrine prioritizes the elimination of primary threats above all else. They will perceive the lattice as a flanking maneuver and redeploy to meet it." The light on Solon's central processing core pulsed with a steady rhythmic cadence. "They will be looking at their own reflection," Rostova murmured, more to herself than to the crew. "And they will not recognize it." This was the core of her strategy. The Valtori were so consumed with their own power, their own narrative, that they would be unable to comprehend a tactic that wasn't based on brute force. They would see what they expected to see, another fleet coming to challenge them head-on. Their greatest weapon was our greatest vulnerability until we made it theirs. The minutes bled into hours. The countdown timer on the Valtori broadcast ticked below the 6-hour mark. On the bridge of the Steadfast, a new sense of purpose had taken hold, replacing the earlier tension. The hum of the ship's systems seemed to deepen, a predator settling into a patient crouch. The air was thick with the scent of ionized particles from the overworked EW emitters and the faint, clean smell of circulated oxygen. "Lattice drones are in position, Admiral," Lee reported, his voice crisp. "Ready to deploy on your command." "Convoy captains have been briefed," Sharma added. "They know their escape vectors. They're waiting for the window." Rostova took a deep breath, the polished chrome of her command chair cool against her palms. She looked at the faces of her crew, saw the trust in their eyes, and felt the weight of the thousands of lives depending on this single, audacious gamble. The Valtori had built their empire on ultimatums, on the belief that a loud enough threat could solve any problem. They had forgotten that true power wasn't about shouting. It was about being heard. "Deploy the lattice," Rostova commanded. "Let's give them something to look at." The mirror does not lie. It only reflects. Dozens of specialized drones previously hidden in the sensor shadows of the human fleet flared to life. They were small, deceptively simple machines, but as they activated in perfect unison, they began to weave a tapestry of light and energy. They projected a complex net of electromagnetic and gravitic signatures carefully calibrated to mimic the presence of an entire battle group. On the Valtori sensors, it would look as if a second human fleet had just dropped out of hyperspace on their exposed flank. From the bridge of the Steadfast, they watched the enemy's reaction on the tactical display. For a full minute, the Valtori formation held steady, a silent testament to their disbelief. Then chaos erupted. Red alerts blossomed across the enemy fleet as their command structure scrambled to respond to the sudden impossible threat. Vectors shifted, weapon ports opened, and a significant portion of the blockading force began to peel away, turning to face the Phantom fleet. "They're taking the bait." Lee breathed, a grin spreading across his face. "They're turning their backs on the convoy." "The lattice is not just a projection, Commander." Solon interjected, its tone flat, but the implication clear. "Its secondary function is now active. We are harvesting their sensor data, their communication protocols, their targeting solutions. We are learning everything about them." The reveal landed with quiet force. Rostova hadn't just built a mirror to distract them, she had built it to dissect them. Their arrogance was the key, and we had turned the lock. The failure rate of Echo 7 Rostova knew was never about the projection itself. The risk came from its immense data-gathering capabilities. The sheer volume of incoming information could overload a ship's EW systems, causing a catastrophic crash. But Sharma and her team were prepared, their consoles glowing as they filtered and processed the flood of Valtori data. They weren't just watching the enemy, they were reading their minds. This was the payoff for Rostova's gamble. The Valtori, in their haste to meet the Phantom threat, were broadcasting their entire tactical playbook. Every command, every targeting solution, every panicked communication was being siphoned, sorted, and analyzed by Solon. The information was a treasure trove, a complete schematic of their enemy's mind. "Admiral," Sharma reported, her voice tight with excitement. "I'm isolating their command frequencies. We have a direct line into their fleet's network." The cool hiss of the ship's internal climate control seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. "Do not jam them," Rostova ordered. "Just listen. Let them think they are in control. A predator is most dangerous when it believes it is the hunter." As the Valtori warships repositioned, a gap opened in their blockade. It was a narrow window, a corridor of relative safety, just wide enough for the convoy to slip through. It would not last long. Once the Valtori realized their mistake, they would descend on the freighters with merciless fury. "Convoy is green for transit," Lee announced, his eyes darting between the tactical display and the convoy's status board. "Their drives are spooled. They're ready to run." Rostova watched the Valtori ships, their icons on the screen, moving like hungry sharks. They were so focused on the illusion, so convinced of their own superiority, that they had forgotten their primary objective. The public countdown timer, the great instrument of their psychological warfare, was still ticking away, but its meaning had been hollowed out. They were threatening empty space. "Tell the convoy to go," Rostova said, her voice ringing with quiet authority. "Full burn. Do not stop until they cross the threshold." "Oh." They counted down the seconds while we opened the door. The 34 civilian ships surged forward, their engines flaring to life in a brilliant display of coordinated acceleration. They streamed into the gap, a river of light flowing through the breach in the dam. On the main view screen, the image was breathtaking, a testament to courage and precision. The freighters and transports, so vulnerable just moments before, were now making a desperate, beautiful sprint for freedom. The Valtori were slow to react. For nearly a minute, their attention remained fixed on the Ghost Fleet. It was only when the lead freighter, the Starlight Weaver, was halfway to the jump point that the Valtori commander seemed to grasp the full scope of the deception. The enemy's communications, still being monitored by Sharma, erupted in a cacophony of rage and disbelief. "They've seen it," Lee warned. "They're turning back. Torpedo launches detected." "Deploy countermeasures," Rostova ordered calmly. "Our turn to make some noise." The Steadfast and its escorts moved to intercept their point defense lasers, spitting coherent light into the darkness, painting a shield of fire between the escaping convoy and its pursuers. The deck plates vibrated with the steady rhythm of the cannons. A promise made to the helpless is the most sacred oath of all. The human warships absorbed the first wave of Valtori aggression. Energy beams dissipated against their shields and kinetic slugs glanced off their armored hulls. They held the line, a wall of steel and resolve, buying the convoy precious seconds. But the Valtori were numerous, and their fury was absolute. A volley of plasma torpedoes slipped past the point defense screen, streaking towards one of the smaller human frigates. "Brace for impact on the stalwart," Lee called out, his voice tight. The frigate shuddered as 2 torpedoes found their mark. Damage control reports flashed across Rostova's command screen. "Frigate Stalwart reports minor hull breaches, Section 7, Solon recited dispassionately. "Shields are holding at 60%. Crew casualties are 0, but 2 are being treated for plasma burns." It was a cost, but a manageable one. A reminder that even a clean victory could leave scars. Rostova watched the last of the convoy ships, the Starlight Weaver, vanish into the swirling vortex of the jump point. They were safe. The first part of her plan was complete. The board was now reset, the pieces rearranged for the next, more dangerous phase. They thought the convoy was the prize. It was only the bait. With the civilians clear, the Ghost Fleet created by Lattice Protocol Echo 7 dissolved into nothingness. The Valtori, their rage now focused and absolute, turned their full attention to the 10 human warships that had so thoroughly humiliated them. Their formation tightened, their weapons charged, their intent clear. They were no longer interested in ultimatums. They wanted blood. The Valtori Overlord, a being known only as Kalen, broadcast a new message, this time directed solely at the Steadfast. His face appeared on the main view screen, a mask of cold fury. His features were sharp avian, his eyes burning with indignation. "Admiral Rostova," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "You have made a grave error. Your deception has bought you nothing but a more personal doom. We came to ensure the safety of civilians," Rostova replied, her own face a calm, unreadable mask. "That has been achieved." A new ultimatum appeared on the screen, replacing the old one. This time it was a demand for the surrender of Rostova and her command staff. "You will surrender yourselves for public judgment," Kalen declared, "or my fleet will grind yours into dust." You have 1 hour. Their doctrine had only one response to failure: escalate. Rostova looked at the new countdown, the new threat, and felt a profound sense of pity for her enemy. They were trapped in a cycle of their own making, unable to conceive of a solution that didn't involve dominance and submission. They had learned nothing. Her gaze drifted to the data streams still pouring in from the passive sensors, the lingering echoes of the Valtori network. Solon was cross-referencing it, analyzing it, looking for the patterns hidden within the noise. "Solon," she asked, her voice quiet. "The data we gathered, is there anything unusual? Anything that doesn't fit their standard military profile?" "Affirmative, Admiral," the AI responded. "I have isolated a recurring high-energy resonance signature emanating from the Valtori flagship. It does not match any known weapon drive or shield system. It is a constant low-frequency broadcast of immense power directed at their own fleet." It was a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit a mystery waiting to be solved. A faint smile touched Rostova's lips. The Valtori thought they were setting a trap. In reality, they had already walked into hers. They had shown her their playbook, their network, and now their greatest secret. A chain is only as strong as the will of those who wear it. The civilian convoy, now safely in the neighboring system, broadcast its own message on all Audiobook channels. It was not a message of defiance or anger, but one of gratitude. News feeds showed the Starlight Weaver docking at a starbase, the young girl with the stuffed animal walking down the ramp, her eyes wide with wonder, not fear. The captain of the convoy publicly thanked the United Navy for upholding the principles of free passage and for shielding the innocent. The story was no longer about a Valtori ultimatum. It was about a human promise. The Galactic news agencies picked up the story immediately. The Valtori's carefully crafted narrative of strength and inevitability was shattered, replaced by an image of them being outmaneuvered and outthought. Their public countdown had ended not with a surrender, but with an escape. Their power was shown to be hollow, their voice loud but unheard. On the bridge of the steadfast, Rostova watched the reports. She saw the shift in public perception, the subtle change in the galactic conversation. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The Valtori had made their power a public spectacle, and now that spectacle was turning against them. "They are losing control of the narrative," Sharma observed, a note of satisfaction in her voice. "They never had it," Rostova corrected. "They only had the microphone." Their power was a shout in a void. Ours was a conversation. Rostova's attention returned to the strange energy signature. A background hum, a constant broadcast, directed at their own fleet. It was a control mechanism, a leash. The Valtori didn't command through loyalty. They commanded through compulsion. This was the dark heart of their ultimatum doctrine, the engine that drove their manufactured unity. The energy signature, Rostova said, a sudden chilling clarity in her mind. It's a compliance field. It's how Kalen ensures his orders are followed without question. It projects an aura of absolute authority, punishing dissent with crippling psychological feedback. The pieces clicked into place. The ultimatum wasn't just a threat to their enemies, it was a command to their own people. Lee's eyes widened in understanding. They're slaves to their own system. That's why they can't adapt. They're not allowed to. "And that," Rostova said, turning to face her command crew, her eyes alight with a cold, righteous fire, "is how we are going to break them." She saw not a fleet of warships before her, but a collection of prisoners shackled by an invisible chain. Her mission was no longer just about survival. It was about liberation. "We will not break their ships. We will break their chains." The new plan was audacious, elegant, and profoundly dangerous. It did not involve weapons in the traditional sense. It was a strategy of pure electronic and psychological warfare designed to turn the Valtori's greatest strength into their most catastrophic weakness. Rostova would accept their offer of an open corridor for her surrender. She would fly the Steadfast directly into the heart source of their formation. But she would not be going to surrender. She would be going to broadcast. Solon, calculate the precise frequency and resonance of the Valtori compliance field, Rostova ordered. Calculated, Admiral, the AI replied instantly. It is a complex waveform, but I have the primary carrier frequency. Anya, Rostova said, turning to her EW specialist. Can you create a resonance cascade? I don't want to jam their field. I want to hijack it. I want to amplify it and insert our own message into their network. Sharma's fingers flew across her console, her expression a mixture of awe and intense concentration. It's theoretically possible, Admiral. The power requirements would be immense. We'd have to channel the entire output of our main reactor through the primary comms dish. The ship would be effectively powerless for the duration of the broadcast. A single voice of truth is louder than a chorus of lies. The risk was astronomical. If it failed, the Steadfast would be a sitting duck surrounded by an enraged enemy fleet, its shields down and its weapons cold. But if it worked, it would be a blow from which the Valtori ascendancy might never recover. It would expose their doctrine for the fraud it was not on galactic news channels, but inside the minds of their own soldiers. The Valtori expect us to fight them ship to ship. Rostova explained, her voice steady and sure. They have prepared a kill box in that corridor. They believe we will try to double-cross them with a surprise attack. The low thrum of the standby engines was the only sound on the bridge. The probability of survival if we enter the corridor is 18%. Solon stated, its voice a cold splash of reality. Their posture is aggressive and anticipates a conventional trap. The odds don't matter, Solon. Rostova replied, her gaze fixed on the enemy flagship. The principle does. They use their ledger to threaten. We will use ours to teach. This was the moment her arc completed its turn from patient restraint to righteous, decisive action. She would not answer their ultimatum with violence, but with clarity. They offered a corridor to a cage. We will make it a path to freedom. The order was given. The Steadfast separated from its escorts, its powerful engines glowing a brilliant blue in the void. The 9 remaining human warships held their position, a silent, watchful honor guard. They knew their role: to witness, to record, and to be ready for the consequences, whatever they might be. Anya Sharma rerouted the ship's power, her expression grimly focused. Lights on the bridge dimmed as non-essential systems were shut down. The steady hum of the life support system seemed to grow louder in the sudden quiet. The ship felt different. Its immense energy coiled like a spring ready to be released in a single, overwhelming burst of information. Commander Lee stood by his console, his hands resting on the manual override for the ship's defenses. His job was to do nothing unless the plan failed, a testament to his discipline and his trust in his admiral. Every member of the crew was at their post, their hearts beating a steady rhythm against the inside of their ribs, a human counterpoint to the ship's mechanical pulse. Admiral, Lee said, his voice low, we are entering the corridor. On the main view screen, the Valtori fleet loomed a forest of gunmetal gray and predatory angles. They parted before the Steadfast, creating the promised channel. It was an unnerving sight, like a predator opening its maw. The enemy ships were silent. Their weapon ports open, their targeting sensors locked onto the lone human vessel. The air on the bridge was thick with a silence that felt heavier than any sound. The Steadfast glided deeper into the formation, the heart of the enemy's power. The countdown timer for Rostova's surrender ticked below 10 minutes. The trap was set. The players were in position. But the Valtori had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the game they were playing. They thought this was an execution. It was an exposure. "Admiral, we are at the heart of their formation," Solon reported, its voice the only unwavering thing in the universe. "Optimal range for broadcast resonance. Kalen's flagship is 3,000 kilometers off our port bow." The air on the bridge was cold, recycled, and carried the faint, sharp scent of ozone from the straining energy conduits. A bead of sweat traced a path down Commander Lee's temple. Rostova's eyes were fixed on the Valtori flagship, the source of the insidious compliance field. It was a vessel of brutalist design, all sharp angles and weapon emplacements, a physical manifestation of its commander's philosophy. It was the head of the snake. The time for subtlety was over. The time for a reckoning had arrived. She keyed the ship-wide comms, her voice calm and clear. "All hands brace for total power shunt. This is it." Then she turned to her EW officer. "Anya, begin the reckoning." Sharma's hands moved with practiced grace, initiating the final command. The steadfast groaned a deep, resonant tremor that ran through its very bones. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into the stark emergency red of backup lighting. Every non-essential system went dark as the ship's fusion heart poured its entire output into a single focused purpose. The main communications dish, now a weapon in its own right, began to glow with an incandescent white light. The ship broadcasted no sound, no words, no images. It sent a single pure, resonant frequency, a carrier wave tuned to perfection. It was a key designed to unlock the cage the Valtori had built for themselves. For a moment, nothing happened. The Valtori fleet hung silent, a predator waiting for the final, satisfying kill. Then Rostova gave the second command. "Now send them the ledger." We did not send a message. We opened a mirror. Into the compliance field, Solon poured the data. It was the unfiltered truth of the last 12 hours, a torrent of information pushed directly into the minds of every Valtori crew member. They heard their own panicked communications as the Ghost Fleet appeared. They saw the tactical data showing their commander sacrificing a third of his blockade to chase a phantom. They felt the cold, hard numbers of their fuel and munitions expenditure on a worthless target. Most damningly, they were shown the internal communications from Kalen's own bridge. They heard him rage not at the threat to his fleet, but at the damage to his reputation. They heard him dismiss the lives of his own crews as secondary to the performance of his ultimatum. The broadcast was a meticulously crafted sequence of their own failures, their own fears, and their own leaders' contempt for them, a truth they could not deny because it came from their own mouths. A lie shatters when confronted with its own voice. On the bridge of the Valtori flagship, Kalen staggered back, clutching his head. The resonant cascade felt like a spike of ice being driven into his skull. His own control network had been turned against him, amplifying not his authority, but his hypocrisy. Around him, his bridge crew were recoiling in confusion and pain, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning horror. The unquestioning loyalty enforced by the field was gone, replaced by a terrible, searing clarity. "Fire!" Kalen screamed, his voice raw. "Fire on the human ship! Erase them now!" But his command was no longer absolute. It was just a shout in a room full of people who had suddenly been given the freedom to question. His ultimatum doctrine had a fatal flaw. It required perfect, unthinking obedience. Rostova had just given 73 crews the power to think for themselves. Their unity was a cage, and we had just handed them the key. A handful of Valtori ships, their captains either fanatically loyal or too slow to process the new reality, obeyed the order. Lances of particle energy and volleys of kinetic slugs slammed into the Steadfast. The ship bucked violently, the shriek of tortured metal echoing through the decks. Red damage icons flared to life on Lee's console. "Aft shields have collapsed," he yelled over the din. "We have hull breaches in engineering decks 4 through 7. Main capacitor is bleeding energy." The deck plates shuddered again as another volley struck home. The impact felt as a physical blow. The cost of this lesson was being paid in plasma burns and fractured steel. But most of the Valtori fleet remained silent. On dozens of bridges, captains were staring at their tactical displays, then at their crews, a new and dangerous light in their eyes. The broadcast from the Steadfast continued a relentless stream of truth that was systematically dismantling a decade of indoctrination. The human fleet had not fired a single shot, yet they were winning the most decisive battle of all. A ledger balanced in public cannot be denied. Before the assault could continue, a new element entered the fray. On the main view screen, Rostova saw the 9 remaining ships of her fleet surge forward. They were not firing. Instead, they moved with incredible precision, placing themselves between the Steadfast and its attackers. Their shields flared brilliantly as they absorbed the incoming fire, their hulls glowing with dissipated energy. Commander Lee stared at the screen, his mouth agape. "Admiral, they're shielding us." "That was not their order." Solon stated a hint of something that might have been surprise in its synthesized voice. Rostova watched her heart swelling with a fierce pride. Her captains had seen the situation, understood her intent, and acted on their own initiative to protect their flagship and the principle for which it fought. They were not just following orders, they were upholding a belief. True leadership is not command, it is inspiration. This act of selfless protection was the final catalyst. Across the Valtori fleet, a choice was made. One of the larger Valtori cruisers, the Iron Talon, turned its weapons not on the human ships, but on one of Kalen's loyalists. The beam sliced through the smaller ship's shields, crippling its engines. It was a declaration, a rebellion sparked by a single act of truth. The killbox turned on itself. The pristine formation of the Valtori fleet dissolved into a chaotic melee. Ships that had been allies moments before were now exchanging fire, the schism Rostova had engineered, erupting into open civil war. The public spectacle Kalen had so desperately wanted was now a reality, but it was his own fleet tearing itself apart, broadcast live for the entire galaxy to see. They came to make an example of us. Instead, they became a cautionary tale. On the battered bridge of the Steadfast, the broadcast finally ended. The main comms dish cooled, its incandescent glow fading. Emergency power was rerouted to life support and core systems. The ship was wounded, drifting, but it had done its job. Rostova watched the chaos unfold, a grim but necessary consequence. Her fleet had moved from shielding her to actively protecting the Valtori ships that had laid down their arms, using their superior defenses to suppress the remaining loyalists. "Kalen's flagship is attempting to flee," Sharma reported, her voice strained but steady. "Let him go," Rostova ordered. "His power is broken. His fleet is his no longer." There was no need for vengeance. The Valtori doctrine had consumed itself, a snake eating its own tail. The lesson was complete. A doctrine built on fear will always collapse from within. As the battle subsided, a new order began to emerge from the chaos. The senior Valtori captain of the Iron Talon opened a channel to the Steadfast. His face was weary, but his eyes were clear. "Admiral Rostova," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his actions. "The ascendancy is no more. We are in your debt. There is no debt." Rostova replied, her voice echoing in the quiet of her damaged bridge. You have paid your own accounts. We ask only that you honor the principles of free passage and self-determination. The low hum of the emergency power systems was a constant reminder of the price they had paid for this victory. The smell of burnt insulation hung in the air. In the aftermath, a message was sent to the Galactic Concordance. It was a simple public entry on the official interstellar ledger. By the joint declaration of the United Navy and the newly formed Valtori Free Fleet, the practice of ultimatums backed by public countdowns was now classified as a prohibited act of psychological terrorism. The technology of the compliance field was to be dismantled and its schematics sealed under galactic treaty. Their loudest threat was erased by a quiet amendment. The human fleet remained in the system for 3 days, assisting with repairs and helping to stabilize the newly independent Valtori ships. The Steadfast itself was a testament to the battle's cost, its aft section, a scorched and twisted landscape of damaged plating. 2 of its crew had been seriously injured, but thanks to the swift actions of the medical team, both would recover. It was a victory, but one written in scars. Before they prepared for their departure, Rostova took a moment to watch a news feed from the starbase where the convoy had found safety. It showed families reuniting, children laughing, the simple, beautiful chaos of life allowed to continue. The young girl with the stuffed animal was there, pointing at a simulation of the Steadfast on a public screen, her expression one of pure awe. The stakes had been real, and the outcome had been worth every scar. A single life saved is a universe of potential preserved. Admiral, Solon said, its voice cutting through her thoughts. Damage control reports we will be ready for transit in 1 hour. The new Valtori Council has formally requested our presence at their first official assembly. We won't be attending, Solon, Rostova replied softly. This is their future to build. Our part is done. She looked at the tactical display, now showing the peaceful, orderly formations of 2 allied fleets, where before there had been only a standoff. Log the outcome. The Eridani threshold is secure. The ledger is balanced. They demanded we acknowledge their power. We taught them the meaning of strength. The work was finished. The noise of the ultimatum had been replaced by the quiet hum of cooperation. Rostova stood on her bridge, the ship's vibrations, a familiar comfort, even in its wounded state. The emergency lighting had been replaced by the soft, steady glow of the main systems, a sign of healing, of recovery. She thought about Kalen's fundamental mistake. He believed strength was the volume of one's voice, the power to compel obedience. He never understood that true strength is the clarity of one's purpose, the conviction to hold a line not with threats but with resolve. It is the quiet courage to teach when one could easily destroy, to offer a mirror instead of a sword. The tactical display finalized its tally, the icons of the newly freed Valtori ships clicking from hostile red to a serene, hopeful blue. A truly strong voice does not need to shout.